I want to talk today to all appearances. Many people think I'm a hard-nosed businessman. I've started a couple of companies and sold them successfully. I worked for companies like MTV and what's now the A&E Network and a number of other corporations where I was very successful in those roles. But today, I want to talk about magic. I want to talk about superstition, because you see, I'm actually a very superstitious person who believes in magic. And it's the Trappist monks of Mepkin Abbey down in South Carolina that convinced me of this magic. So the first theme I want you to kind of hold in your head, because I'm going to try to illustrate when I want to talk about through storytelling rather than lecturing to the best of my ability, is happy accidents. You know, if you study history or you even study scientific discoveries, there is this thing called happy accidents. You know, and in my book, The Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks, I said, I don't want to beat people over the head with any kind of religious message, so I said, you can call it grace if you want, or you can call it luck. But there's something about the Trappist model that's lucky as hell. I mean, these guys have been, for 1,000 years, they've been in business. And part of their big deal is they have to raise the money for themselves. They all have businesses. All the Trappist monasteries have business. And they're fabulously successful. And they only work, and they're about average age. At Mepkin, when I first went there, their average age was 65. They work 4 hours a day. They don't talk much. They don't talk at all, pretty much, except when permitted. And you know what? They don't give a damn about business. And they make money hand over fist. So I want to come back to this, happy accidents. This is the ability to have things happen. In my introduction to my book, I said, the Trappist monks don't just know how to make success happen, they know how to let success happen. And this is what I really wanted to get across in my book. How can you let success happen? So I want to illustrate. So back in 1996, I was the CEO of a struggling, up-and-coming, we wanted to think up-and-coming, software company that was a couple of years old. I was also doing some volunteer teaching at Duke University, and some of these kids over there, damn them, got me convinced that I should jump out of an airplane with them, go skydiving. And I like to say that I had enough guts to jump out of an airplane, but not enough guts to tell these kids that I was too damn old to be jumping on airplanes. Anyway, I hit the ground hard, busted my ankle terribly, compound fractured the tibia and fibula, did a lot of cursing, and ended up in the hospital for a week. But the interesting thing of this, and by the way, I'm going to come back to this, is one of the happiest accidents of my life. It precipitated a crisis. I started having panic attacks. I went into extreme depression. My whole life started to spiral out of control. I didn't understand what was going on, etc. When all of a sudden, about 3 months later, when I was finally back at work, but I was still hobbling around, I got a telephone call from one of these students. And he said, Augie, I'm taking your advice. And I said, what? He said, you told us to do something interesting with our summers instead of just chasing women and drinking beer. And I said, well, I don't remember saying that, but so what are you doing? And he said, I'm at a Trappist monastery, Mepkin Abbey, down in South Carolina, spending the summer here as a monastic guest. And suddenly, I just heard myself say, I want to come. Just like that. He said, when? I said, now. I heard myself say. And of course, then I realized it's Wednesday. I can't leave the company in the middle of the week. I said, this weekend, I mean. He said, okay, let me go ask Brother John. And he came back and he said, yeah, he says, come on down this weekend. Which, as I've gotten to know the monks, he must have been, they did like Josh. His name was Josh. Very much for them to squeeze me in, because there's a long waiting list to come down as a retreat. Now, I went down there for the weekend, and I have a tremendous lot of stories about that first weekend. But one thing was incredibly important. I was standing in line at the refectory, or the cafeteria, and I'm behind this guy who's obviously this monk, who's obviously well into his 80s. He's stooped over like this. He's walking like this. And in order to get a tray for the food, you have to bend down. The trays are like knee level. And it seemed to me like this monk was taking forever to get this tray. And I noticed even a little bit of irritation in my mind. And so he finally gets his tray, and he turns around and he goes, and he gives me the tray. Well, it rocked my world. So a lot of other things kind of like that happened. And so I was hooked. So I started coming back again, more weekends, more weekends. Finally, Christmas time, I make it an appointment to come down and spend like 3 weeks there as a monastic guest. So I show up there, they give me a robe to wear, they put me up with the monks, I live in the, and the first thing that happens is I get this job packing eggs, because they had 40,000 chickens, and they had this eggery, and my job is they all go through this line, and they grade them and everything, take the cracked ones out, and they finally get into cartons by large, medium, etc., and they spit out onto a line. And a big wheels going around. And my job was to take the large and put them in a carton, the small, and there was this other monk there. And his name was Father Malachi. And he was very old, he was in his 80s too. His job was to do nothing but to make the boxes. So he would unpack them, make them square, put a strap around them so the flaps wouldn't open up, and then bring them over and set them by me. That's all that man did. Every day is his job at the monastery, was unfold boxes. And as I got to know him a little bit over the time I was there, as I say in my book, I saw a very simple man, a very simple monk doing a very simple task. And then one day he says to me, he says, I don't know why he even told me this story. He told me that a couple of years earlier, somebody had donated this huge box of books in French, theological tomes written in French. And that the abbot, Father Francis, had called him into the office and said, Father Malachi, will you read these books and write a summary for them for the library? And Malachi says to me, he's this very gentle, kind, blue-eyed guy. He says, well, Francis thought I spoke French, but I didn't. But he's so busy, I didn't bring it up. So I just stayed up for a couple of months, learned French, read the books, and wrote the summaries. Well, when he says he stayed up late, the monks get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And they go to bed 8 o'clock at night. So if he's staying up late to learn French, and he did it in a couple of months, whoa. And I learned a lot of other things about him. And that was a real shocker. What's going on at this organization that they can get that kind of employee engagement? You know. And then the final thing that happened that first Christmas was, it was Christmas Eve, and I was at Mass at 8 o'clock at night. First of all, you get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, usually go to bed at 8 o'clock at night, except on Christmas Eve, because you have their equivalent of midnight Mass, which is actually at 8 o'clock at night. And then afterwards, it goes to about 9:30, and then afterwards there's a party in the refectory, which is unbelievable for the Trappists to have a party. So they have this party in the refectory. And so I'm in the church, and it was cold, Christmas Eve night. It was probably 38 degrees, it was pouring down rain. So after the Mass is over, I go over to the refectory, and I'm dead tired. I mean, I'm up to 3 in the morning. I've been working you work all day. It's not like any different day for them, except you stay up a little later, have this little party. So I eat a few cookies, and all of a sudden I start heading for the door, and it's pouring. I can hear the rain, bang, bang, bang on the. I said, oh no, I don't have an umbrella, and I got this long walk back, and I got my surplice on. I'm gonna have to get up at 3 o'clock. No, well, actually, get on Christmas Day they let you sleep till 5. I got to get up at 5, and I'll have this wet. So I open the door, and the light just kind of beams out, and there's this guy in an umbrella, standing under an umbrella, circling by the light. And I looked, double take. I said, Brother John, what are you doing? He said, I'm here to walk people who forgot their umbrella back to their room. So here's a man that's been in the monastery 30 years. This is his one party a year. And he would rather stand outside under an umbrella. Well, long story short, I became obsessed. So I kept coming back and coming back, plus I'm going through this crisis. So they helped me get through the crisis. And gradually I become addicted to this way of life. And I find myself volunteering for extra work, going down more often, becoming the go-to guy for Brother John when he needed something. And as I like to say, giving away trays as fast as I could. And this carried over into the rest of my life. And the next thing I know, a couple years later, a guy walks into my office from Israel. I never met him before in my life. Within a month of that first initial meeting, he offers to buy my company for a lot of money. a company I didn't think we would, ever be able to sell. We closed the deal on March 31st of 2000. And for those people who are historically minded, 2 months later the stock market collapsed, so the deal probably wouldn't have happened. But most importantly, to me at least, or not most importantly, he became a very close friend, and he's still a close friend of mine to this day. A few years later, our combined companies were then sold to BMC Software for $150 million in cash. So that was kind of a happy accident that I wasn't looking forward to. Neither was I looking forward to the acquisition. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, I get this email from one of my former students, and he says, the Templeton Foundation is got a contest. And I looked up, he said, you can win some money. And anyway, it's a writing contest, essay contest. So I look it up online, and it says, in 3,500 words or less, answer this question: what is the purpose of life? And the grand prize is $100,000. It's open to previously published material, professional writers, anybody who wants to. The only thing, it's got to be in English, 3,500 words or less. I had never written anything in my life, but I decided, well, maybe I'll take a crack at this, but I'm getting nowhere. And then another happy accident, I bump into another one of my former students, and I tell him about it, and he says, how's it going? I said, I'm getting nowhere fast, and I only have like a week. I mean, I found out at the very end of this 2-year contest. I mean, and he says, why don't you write that story about Brother John under the umbrella? He says, you're always telling the damn thing. So why don't you write it down? I write it down, get it done the day before, send it out at the deadline, forget all about it. 3 or 4 months later, I get a tell, you won. You won the $100,000. You won the grand prize. Brother John's it. Well, so I do that, and then the next thing you know, I don't even remember why I did this. A year or so later, I sit down over the weekend, I said, why are these darn Trappist monks so damn good at business? And I wrote what I thought was a white paper for my close friends and people. Somebody who I gave it to Forbes magazine. And I get a telephone call from the guy who's now my editor. He says, I got a hold of this thing. I love it. I want to publish it as it's too long. It's not an article. I want to publish it as a 4-part in Forbes Online. I said, well, go ahead. He says, I only want to change one thing. I said, what is it? He said, I want to call it The Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks. I said, go ahead. Smash hit. Happy accident, smash hit. So then he invites me to become a leadership contributor for Forbes, which I am to this day. And then I happen to be in New York, so I say, well, I'll call him, I'll go meet him. He says, this ought to be turned into a book. And I said, well, I don't know, how do you do that? Or blah, 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 blah. And then I get a telephone call from a guy. He said, hey, his name is Miles Thompson. He said, I ran into a friend of yours at a party. He says, you might be a pretty good writer. I represent Columbia Business School Publishing. And if you ever have any ideas for a book, let us know. We'd kind of be interested. I said, well, as a matter of fact, I have an idea. And now, so Columbia Business School Publishing publishes my book, Business Secrets of the Trappist Monk. It becomes extremely successful. It's been different languages around the globe, et cetera, et cetera. Happy accident after happy accident after happy accident. Now, finally, in 2009, some former students started a company in New York City. They asked me to help them out. And by the way, I'm going to introduce now the second theme I want you to think about. The whole monk business model is based on service and selflessness. You give instead of taking. So they asked me to help them. And I said, okay. So I go up to New York City, and they said, well, guess what? We don't have any money. But we would like you to help us. And I said, okay, I'll help you. And they said, we'll pay your expenses. We can manage that. I said, okay. And they said, we'll give you some stock. I said, great. I said, give me some stock. So they gave me a lot of stock. I mean, the company was in a room about the size of this room we're in here right now. The kids were 28, 29 years old, just starting out. So I take the stock. I work for 4 or 5 months. I go back to North Carolina. The stock, I never thinking the stock would be worth anything. Anyway, that company went public in April at $1.3 billion trade. And as of October 10th, I will be allowed to start selling my stock because there's a lockup of 6 months. I called my accountant and I said, hey, how are tax consequences on this? And he said, He says, is this happening for you again? This is the third. And I said, you know, you're absolutely right. It is the third. All 3 happy accidents. All 3 times it's happened. It's been happy accidents. So I hope I'm trying desperately. I don't want to come across like I'm bragging, because I want to come back around and say that everything that has happened for me has happened to me since I broke my ankle. And all of these things just magically come together in ways that I can't possibly anticipate. And this is the monk's model. And it takes a tremendous amount of faith to execute on this model. Because, you know, now, for example, everything, I have a nonprofit corporation. He mentioned that one of the things we're doing is we're taking kids that are really being screwed over, basically, in public schools and paying for their private school education. And we just started with the first young lady. But I have a nonprofit corporation, and it's dedicated to service and selflessness. Every dime I make from book sales, from public speaking, from consulting, from coaching, everything goes into that nonprofit. And I've been doing this forever. You know, I am in the process right now of taking my brother John essay, which the rights came back to me from the Templeton Foundation, and a happy accident with a woman who works with me, Melissa said, another happy accident. We stumbled on this artist who wants to help us turn it into an illustrated book, a Christmas book. So I said, okay. So I call up some people in New York to check this artist out. And I actually have a nephew who's working at Scholastic where they do all that. He said, okay. He says, I'll check him out. He said, I want to know whether what he was asking me to pay for it, whether it was worth it. And he said, I said, my God. He said, this guy's like #1. He's like, everybody's using him. He's on the cover of every one of our books. And so I'm going to be investing with him. He's going to do 18 to 20 colored paintings. He's going to do the cover art. Am I ever going to see any, you know, the book business is tough, ladies and gentlemen. Am I ever going to, it's going to cost me a lot of money. It's probably going to cost me $100,000 to put this book on the market. And why am I going to do it? I'll tell you why I'm going to do it. Because 3 or 4 weeks ago, a guy showed up at my house, an executive with BB&T, and he told me that that his wife walked in on him, who he adored and loved, and said, I want out, and divorced him. And he said he went into a death spiral, but somebody gave him my essay, and he said it saved my life. And he said, because of that, he went to the monastery for 2 weeks himself. And there they gave him my phone number. And then he drove all the way from Charlotte just to thank me. So I'm thinking, oh, this is great, but this book needs to help other people. This essay needs to help other people. And if it costs me all my money, I'm going to do it. But deep down inside, I know that anything I do along these lines will come back to me in ways I don't anticipate. It probably won't be monetary. But this is the secret. So I want to end with leaving you a couple more lessons. My book is full of them. My book is all about the monks and all about how I've applied this in my own business. By the way, don't let anybody tell you, one of the things I enjoyed about writing my book was I am an entrepreneur who knows exactly what it's like to be in the trenches. I know what it's like to go 3 years without a paycheck. I know what it's like to make a payroll. So don't tell me that service and selflessness is all fluffy for somebody else, just like you guys. So I'm going to end by telling you, first of all, it is in your own self-interest to forget your self-interest. Number 2, the more successfully you forget yourself, the more successful you will be. And this is not crazy. The more, I came up through sales, and any great salesman will tell you that the more he forgets about himself, forgets about his product, forgets about his commissions, and forgets about his quota, and fanatically focuses on helping his customer, he blows through the quota, he makes more sales than he can possibly imagine. The job of every leader is not to make yourself successful, it's to make other people successful. And the more you focus on making other people successful, guess what? The faster you get successful. The shortest distance between 2 points is the long way around. It's from you to someone else and back to you, not you to you. So the next point I want to emphasize is aim past the target. What the monks have discovered is that success, monetary success, all the things that we usually think of as success, is the trailing indicator. It's the byproduct of living your life for something bigger than yourself. And the more you can aim, you know, in business, in basketball, they say aim for the back of the basket. In golf, aim for the back of the cup. Aim in archery, aim past the target. You must have something bigger. And the more, and when you're aiming past and all this other stuff, you know, in the Christian parlance, seek first the kingdom of heaven, everything else takes care of itself. And if you're not Christian, then take it as a metaphor. But it really, really works. And, you know, it's a guaranteed formula. It's as old as mankind. The final thing I'd say is that I was very, very good at planning all my life. I'm a good planner. I could put a plan in place and execute, and I actually enjoyed doing that. But people ask me, well, I've never had a plan for my life. My whole life has been a series of happy accidents. And they all stem from the fact that what's more important is not your plan, it's your mission. Why are you on the earth? What is your vocation, as the monks would say? What are you trying to do? And this is so important, and let that be the guiding thing, and then everything else takes care of itself. You know, once I bought in completely and utterly to the monks' philosophy, then I didn't, you know, people say, oh, when did you decide you wanted to be a writer? I still never decided to be a writer. And the next thing I want to say is that but in order to make this thing work, this magic work, first of all, you got to forget about it, not depend on it. Just because you help an old lady across the street, it doesn't mean you can buy a lottery ticket. You're guaranteed to win. But you have to become. It's not something you learn. I'm sure everybody here, I've never had anybody, I think, that doesn't nod their head to some extent when they hear what I'm talking about. But what the monks have done is dedicated their entire lives to becoming. They don't just know about service and selflessness. They don't just preach about it. They become it. Brother Gregory, who, by the way, the guy who gave me my first tray was Brother Gregory. Brother Gregory didn't even realize he was doing it. That was just Brother Gregory. You have to get to the point in your life where it is second nature. You have to become it. My good friend, the same one who bought my company, came to me. I was really surprised because at that time we weren't all that close. And he said to me, I'm getting married for the second time. He said, and I screwed up my first marriage. He said, how can I make sure I really love my fiancée? How can I make sure I don't? I said, Lev, everything's got to change. I enjoyed saying that to him because his eyes got as big as, what do you mean everything? He said, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't run around. I said, that's not what I'm talking about. I said, your first marriage failed because you are a businessman who happened to have a wife. If you want this marriage to be successful, you must transform, you must become a husband who happens to have a business. And I said, and the magic here is, it's going to take a lot for you to believe, is that your business will be better. Your business is going to be better. Because as I say in my book over and over again, the monks are not successful despite the fact that they have high ethics, despite the fact that they put other people first. They're successful because they do. So he asked me, he said, well, all right, I agree. So what do I got to do? I said, the next time you get a telephone call from your number one client and your wife at the same time, you put the client on hold and you take the call from the wife. And if you do that 10,000 times, as Aristotle said, we are what we habitually do. Excellence is not a choice, it's a habit. You do it over and over and over again. And this is the hard part. You must become this kind of person. which means a radical reorientation of your priorities. But once you can do it, and the monks helped me to make those, to become a different kind of person, then that opens you up to the magic. Thank you very much.